The greatness of art is not in the display of knowledge or in material accuracy, but in the distinctness with which it conveys the impressions of a personal vital force that acts spontaneously without fear or hesitation. Artist George Ennis. This is The Artful Painter, art lessons for artists, collectors, and people who love art. Crista Pisano was born and raised in northern New Jersey and began painting in oils in 1989 under the instruction of John Phillip Osborne at the Ridgewood Art Institute in Ridgewood, New Jersey. Now, her career as a painter almost didn't happen because as a young child, she had a yearning to become a ballet dancer. However, at 12 years of age, she nixed that idea and decided it wasn't for her. Crista's mother suggested that she take a look at Bob Ross, the painter on TV. Finding joy in painting, she pursued an education in fine art. Christa graduated from the Lyme Academy College of Fine Arts in 2000, receiving a bachelor's degree of fine arts painting, and in 2003, she received a master's degree of fine arts painting from the New York Academy Graduate School of Figurative Art. With that solid foundation under her belt, she now paints full-time. Aside from participating in various plein air events throughout the year, she exhibits throughout New England and New York. She has received numerous awards and honors, including Best in Show at the Adirondack Plein Air Festival, both in 2012 and 2014. Christa also won honorable mention at Plein Air Easton in 2015 and 2016. In addition to those awards, Plein Air magazine included Christa as one of their featured artists in the December-January 2016 issue. Christa paints landscapes, mostly plein air, but also in her studio in Nyack, New York. Though she's known for painting on a small scale, she also paints larger works in her studio. In this delightful conversation, Christa shows that her adventures in painting in plein air goes way beyond the brush. When she paints, the unexpected may also follow, whether it's rescuing a baby in a runaway baby carriage or learning about owls from a scary-looking biker. Christa takes it all in stride, adding these fantastical stories to her collection of experiences that could only be had from painting outdoors with her friends. If you were to chance upon her in the field painting, you would see Crista Pisano passionately capturing nature's grandeur. My name is Carl Olson, and this is The Artful Painter. Well, Christa, welcome to The Artful Painter.
Thank you for having me.
It's a real pleasure. I've talked to you a couple of times up to this point, and I think we'll have a lot of fun things to talk about despite the pandemic that's going on around us. How are you adapting there in, it's Nyack, New York, right?
Yes, I'm in Nyack, New York, which is a cute little Hudson River town, actually the birthplace of Edward Hopper. And
wow.
His childhood home is here. And actually, they'll give you a map and you could walk around town and see some of the places he painted, some of the houses and stuff, which I never do. Of course, we never do what we live around,
Yeah.
And it's about 20 minutes north of Manhattan up the Hudson River. So it's lovely here. And quarantine for me is exactly what I do every day anyway. And I live across the street from a big park and the Hudson River is right there. So every morning I open the door, I have the view of the river, and why would I want to go anyplace else? This is pretty normal for me, even though I'm in a hot spot, during the COVID epidemic here. Just my normal life.
Well, you live in a place that's full of history, all kinds of history, but from an artistic standpoint, the Hudson River School and all those that came after the Hudson River School, what a privilege that is to live in such a beautiful place. I have driven through that area. I don't remember Nyack per se, but I have driven up through that way, up through Patterson and then cut across over into Connecticut and on up into the New England states a few years back.
Yeah.
It was absolutely beautiful.
Yes, and it's sometimes it's overwhelming to plein air paint on the river in areas where some of the great Hudson River School painters stood and painted. And you can still see the mountain, the shapes of the mountains, like most of that hasn't changed. Houses and trains and all that kind of stuff and factories are here. But sometimes it can be overwhelming, to know that you're painting in the place where the masters painted. I've had a couple experiences like that here, like up at Alana, up the Hudson a little bit. And that place, everybody painted up there. You're in the presence of greatness around here from the past painters. So it's a pleasure to live here. Makes it hard to want to leave. I go so many places, and there's so many places I say I can live here, but there's really nothing like the Hudson River. It's
a beautiful place. But a lot of the Hudson River School artists, they painted on a much larger scale than what you do. You're more known for smaller paintings, from what I understand.
Yeah, I try to make something feel big in a little space. I still try to capture, really that's what I'm interested in, is trying to capture the grandeur, whether I'm on the Hudson River or in a big giant field or painting a big oak tree. I try to still make it feel like you're in this big space, but just captured into a little surface. And then I feel like if I don't do that, I fail. So I actually wind up wiping out a lot of what I start outside. That's the goal, really, and what I'm interested in.
Well, and I think you succeed. I was just looking at your gallery, and there's one painting that's called Nocturne 12:30 a.m., done back in 2016. And the size is 5 1/4 inches by 1 3/4 inches. I don't think I've ever painted that small. And yet the painting looks fabulous.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's getting a little too small for me. Like that one, I like that.
So you were pushing the envelope there, huh?
Yeah, or you know what? My framer made me a frame, and I looked at it and said, "Really, this is what Now you cut me a panel, and I got to paint a 1 by whatever." It may have happened that way, but I really am comfortable with my favorite size. Not comfortable with. My favorite size is usually like a 2 by 6, 2 by 5. That's inches.
So that's a wide, even though that's small, that's a wide format. It's almost a panoramic size. I
like odd sizes too. Some of my sizes, if you look on my Instagram or whatever, it'll be like 4 1/8 by 5 1/8 or something like that. That interests me too, the non-standard sizes. And I have no idea where that came from.
I was going to ask.
I don't know why.
Well, when you first started painting, you developed an interest in oil painting. Were you already thinking in terms of small sizes, or how did that come about?
No, and I definitely have put myself into a niche, which I don't particularly like, and that wasn't what I didn't just wake up and say, I'm going to paint small, and this is going to be my thing and whatever.
I'm typecasting you. Oh no.
Typecasting isn't always that bad, is it?
Hey, we're gonna break it then. This is your opportunity to break that typecast.
But it definitely has been a theme throughout my education that I kept going back to this small scale. And a matter of fact, when I was in undergrad at the Lyme Academy of Fine Arts, the first painting I ever sold in my life was like a 4 by 6 or something like that. And I had never painted that small. And it was a little watercolor, which is really funny because I'm pretty sure I failed watercolors in college. I'm a terrible watercolor.
No. You were experimental.
I was experimenting.
Yes.
Or just being, defiant, where I just didn't want to paint watercolors at my 18-year-old self. But I remember we had it was maybe the student holiday exhibition or something. And I didn't feel like I had anything of quality to put into this show. And I remember going over to a friend's house. We didn't have dorms. We all would, gather at somebody's house, and everybody's framing their stuff. And it was in the evening, and they're like, well, what are you putting in? And I'm like, I don't really have anything. And one of my friends says, well, what about that little watercolor you got in that book? And I was like, all right. And someone gave me a frame, and I put it in the show, and it sold. And I couldn't believe it. But it definitely did not make me say, oh, well, this small little painting sold, so I should just, do this. But I definitely...
It was just happenstance. It was just serendipitous.
Yeah, and I wish I had a picture of that painting. But I throughout those 4 years at Lyme Academy, we had one landscape painting class, and our instructor would take us to these big, beautiful estates on the Connecticut River. And your class is 2-3 hours. And back then, there's no cell phones. There's no easy, instant way, unless you had a Polaroid, which Polaroid film was expensive. You had just a regular camera. You had to buy film, which was expensive for a student. Then you had to develop it. You didn't know what you were going to get. And I started painting instead of working on one painting in this class. I know there was some time period where I started doing 2 or 3 small paintings within that class. And I continued that for a little bit. And then I'd finish them a little bit, but I definitely was taking those little paintings and making larger paintings, mostly because I knew that we wouldn't be able to go back to that property again. And I would have to capture what I want to see right away, which really is the history of painting studies or small studies or whatever. And then I kind of, forgot about that for a while, went to grad school, New York Academy of Art, and did these large figurative paintings. I have a background in figurative work. And my graduate diploma project was 6 feet by 6 feet.
6 feet by 6 feet, not 6 inches by 6 inches. Yeah.
No,
wow.
6 feet by 6 feet. And it was so big that I'm 5'1", so I couldn't get this thing off the wall to, move it around. And I had to use a ladder to get up and paint on it. And that's definitely the largest painting I did. And I wasn't doing any small work at that time until I think the biggest influence that got me down to the sizes I'm currently working on was after grad school, I had to move back home, and Dad said, you got to get a job. So you can live here and you got to get a job. And I definitely was not ready to be teaching. And I had a painting instructor from the time I was 12 years old up until now. I'm 25 years old. And it's kind of like, well, now what? I'll get a job, and then I'll get a studio, because that's what you're supposed to do. And I'll try to get into shows or whatever. I couldn't find a job in the paper. I was either overqualified or underqualified for anything that had to do with art. Plus, it was post 9/11, so it was a little. That
was a tough time.
Weird.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I started grad school in Tribeca, New York, about a week before 9/11. So we were already displaced at the school from a fire that happened in the summer. We were kind of put into 2 different buildings to begin with. So 9/11 really displaced us. And it was an interesting time. And then to, live in the tri-state area as well. And that's right when the economy got crazy. It was just hard to get a job anyway. But I right before I was just going to start waitressing or something, I saw an ad for a crafter. I'm like, well, that's interesting. Let me call. It's local. And I went to this interview, had no idea what the job was hired on the spot as an elf. I mean,
wait. As a what?
As an elf. I got hired by a Christmas company to make high-end German Victorian-style Christmas ornaments for a company called Die Blümchen and Company, which means little flower in German. And a lot of very intricate work, very high-end. You were not allowed to see, on these little Christmas ornaments, where the glue was or how it was put together, mostly so it couldn't be reproduced in China and then mass produced in the big box stores. And I worked for this company for 15 years. I made some beautiful, I didn't design the things, but I made these things. This is why I'm an elf. But we were on the Martha Stewart show. We were in all the magazines and everything. Oh, wow. And I think that I was painting little doll heads and mass producing them. I mean, mass producing maybe like 50 to 100.
Mass produce a one of a kind to the extent that can be done.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it definitely at that time, that job was part-time to where I could go to plein air events, work in my studio and, do shows and stuff. And I started just painting smaller and smaller and smaller, mostly because time constraint. Like if I was going to be in this show here and this show here and participate in this, and I needed 3 paintings and I only had 3 days to do them, I'd do these little paintings. And back then I could paint a lot faster. Now I don't. But that handwork, that little crafty handwork definitely had some kind of influence on why I work on the scale I work at now, wow. Even though I didn't know it at the time.
So that was an unintended but wonderful consequence or benefit from doing that. You learned to work in the miniature there.
Yeah, because there's nobody to teach me that. And you just kind of had to.
So it was just trial and error. You just had to figure it out as you went.
Oh, yeah. I put a painting into like an art association show. I belonged to all these art associations where I did these benefit auctions or whatever. But when the painting didn't sell and it would come back, I kind of have it sitting there and go, that gradation in the sky is too drastic and it's flattening it out. So I need to figure out how to get the depth. It took a really long time for me to figure out how to make a big space little tiny, or something feel like a big space in a little tiny panel, if that makes sense. A lot of trial and error. And I still struggle with it every day. And I do work larger also. I have a 22 by 32 in my studio right now. And I struggle going from small to that size because it's just different. It's a different kind of handwork. I like to say that the technique in the smaller works, it's a lot of little handwork, almost like the craft.
Right. So
and then when I go to the larger paintings, it's more like big arm movements and less hand movements. So, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to visualize the process. So if I were to do a 2 by 6 inch painting, and then I wanted to do that as a 2 foot by 6 foot painting, is it a matter of just simply going with bigger brushes and more paint, or is the approach different? What is that approach like?
So the approach is totally different. I find that I have if I have a 2 by 6 painting and I want to blow that up to its comparable size, larger size, I'm never successful with that. I either have to start fresh on the larger, on the 22 by 32, I have to start completely fresh, something I've never done before. Otherwise, I have that mentality of, okay, I've painted this feeling of grand space in this little panel. I in my brain, I can't translate that to the larger canvas. I haven't figured out why yet. It's one of those things I'm working on here, and it drives me crazy. Although I can plein air on a 22 by 32 and be more successful than just doing a studio piece.
On location.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that's something some of these larger ones kind of hang around here for a good year or two before like one I'm working on now. It was a totally different painting about a week ago, totally different subject matter, everything. And I just kind of revamped that one. But it's also really hard to say, all right, I'm going to work on all these little paintings and then switch my brain over to working on a 32 by 32. It's kind of like I have to have a plan if I'm working on a larger painting. as well as to what else is going on in the studio at the time.
Well, is that going to be a trend? Are you trending toward larger, or are you in a comfortable cadence with doing small and the occasional large painting right now?
That's a good question. I'm probably, I think all of us as artists do things that, we're not always completely aware of why we're doing what we're doing. But I think that I'm too comfortable right now with working on some of these smaller paintings. I don't like being comfortable. I like being uncomfortable, because if I'm too comfortable with my technique and I'm too comfortable that, okay, I could just work on this one and it'll be fine, and everything's just going to work out the way I want. When I feel that comfortable, I feel like I'm getting stagnant and I'm not elevating what I can do. So I think there's something going on right now in my studio where I've been gravitating more towards the larger work because I'm too comfortable with the small work.
Well, isn't that?
If that makes...
Yeah, it does make sense. And isn't that part of the fun of being an artist, going through that little bit of tension between those, from the comfortable state to the uncomfortable? It's like going on a new expedition somewhere to a place you've never been before. You're a little bit nervous, but you're also excited about going. That's the way I think of that tension between the comfort zone and moving in somewhere that you're not comfortable with.
Oh yeah, it's totally terrifying. But I find it more terrifying to be comfortable.
Yes.
And I think that when I was a student, you look at your instructors and you paint better than all these gods you're studying under, and you say, wow, I can't wait to get to where they are, and they can just paint and it all comes out good. And I think in theory, that's what we want. But for me, when I get to that space, I'm like, all right, I got to change it up. Something's got to happen here. And I could tell when I look at paintings from a year or two ago, when I was in that comfortable spot, I can look and say, oh, that's when I was doing that thing. And that thing got to be too obvious. And I got too comfortable, and it became like a cliche in my work. That I don't like that either. I want everything to be new and fresh and interesting, and not like, oh, she does that thing. And more so in the technique. I think we all have an identity of what we like to paint, but I get really uncomfortable when they all start looking the same, with the same technique and the same handling of surface. That makes me uncomfortable.
I feel your pain. So, but you're far further ahead than I am, because I'm relatively new to this journey. So there's a different set of discomforts when you're learning versus once you've mastered the skills. Well, that's a bad way to say it. Mastering the skills, but become competent enough that you can turn out consistently reasonably good work. And then to take that to the next level, that's a different kind of discomfort there. So I haven't got to that point where you are. I'm still at the point of, I'm really uncomfortable just doing what I do because I don't know if it's going to work or not. I don't know if that makes any sense either, but.
No, it does. I think that comes with time. And I think that especially I do a lot of the plein air competitions, plein air festivals. I do usually about, God willing, I get in about 8, 9, 10 a year. And when I first started doing a large quantity of these in a season, there was definitely that nervousness of, oh my God, I got to put out work and it's all got to be on the wall and it's all got to be consistent. And what if I can't produce and what if, and now it becomes not so much like you're just out there doing your job, but you do learn a way where, okay, I mean, especially if you're at an event and you're not feeling well and you're sick, which happened to me this past fall, and you're down to like, I know, I'm like, I hope I didn't have, maybe I didn't have the COVID or whatever, but it happened like when you're 2 days into where you have to like hand in 6 paintings and you got maybe 2 duds and 1 good one because you can't get out of bed. You wake up that morning and go, okay, I got to do work and I have to just use the skills I know and paint what I know and just make good paintings. I think there's a difference that comes with time. That comes with the amount of time that you spend out in the field, especially when you're dealing with the elements and this and that. 6, 7 years ago, I wouldn't be able to do that. It's the same thing as being like you said, where you are, where to get to a certain comfort zone, then you graduate to another comfort zone. And I think it just continues on like that throughout every artist's career.
So you were invited to the 2020 Olmsted Plein Air Invitational. And of course, we know that the world was turned upside down, not just for Olmsted, but for many plein air events this year. But yet you're still participating because of the way they've reimagined. That's the term that they're using, reimagining. They're presenting artwork virtually, but it's going to be interesting.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that they're taking a leap of faith and a chance on this and on us and letting us work. And they're all wonderful there for doing this. Very grateful.
I think it's an interesting model that may expand when we get beyond pandemic stage. I think there's some tools and things from that may actually help future events. I don't know. I don't know enough about them right now, but my feeling is we're learning new ways of presenting artists to the public, right? Connecting the artists with the public. And this could actually become a feature. I'm not speaking in behalf of Olmsted at this moment, but I'm just thinking that this can be a feature going forward in future events because it extends the amount of time that the works are on market and the way it's marketed and made available. So it's a win-win for the event and especially for the artist.
Yes. I mean, how lucky we are, because if this was 20 years ago, we would not have this kind of format to allow this to happen. I mean, it's crazy that you can like look at people and talk to them on a phone. I mean, it blows my mind all the time still. This is the world we live in, you know? So
plein air has been a big part of your career. What is it that draws you to outdoor painting?
You know, my instructor, my first teacher, John Phillip Osborne, and I lucked out getting him as an instructor. I wanted to be a ballerina so bad. And I took ballet from like preschool till about 7th grade. And Dad got a VCR and got that videotape of the dance recital. And it was like Christmas time, and we put that thing in, and I saw myself, and I was like, oh no, I am not going to be a ballerina. You know, it was like that reality check where you're like prepubescent at like 12 years old, and you're in these tacky little costumes. And I was like, I look like Lady Gaga from the Monster album up there. I have no grace whatsoever. And I quit. And I told Mom, I'm like, I'm done with this. I don't want to do this. And she said, well, you always watch that guy on TV paint, that guy Bob Ross. Do you want to take painting lessons? I said, okay. And she signed me up, and I lucked out and had this amazing teacher. And his passion is landscape painting and plein air painting. And I became my team's like almost like an apprentice, old school apprentice, like making canvases, doing white lead primer and, you know, all kinds of really, really cool things. And he took me out for that first landscape painting class, probably in like 1994 or something like that.
That's early,
I was terrified. I think that whole experience and the romanticism of just being out there and painting plein air and this tradition of plein air stuck with me. And it almost became, I refer to it as like a religion. I mean, you get out there, you set up you get out there, you find your
the rituals, yeah.
Yeah, very ritualistic. I'm a very ritualistic person. And I think it's just stuck with me from that point on. Although my first plein air painting experience, I'm extremely terrified. We parked the car, walked down this hill. We're in this park in Hawthorne, New Jersey. And there's this river, and it was a pretty simple, straightforward view, and it was the spring, so you have all those, like, everything's like pretty greens out there, and you think you're in this like beautiful quiet place, and then to the left they're training police attack dogs in the field next to us. So you got this guy dressed up like the Michelin Man being attacked by German shepherds, and they're yelling commands in German at the dogs and everything. And it was just like two different. Over here is the beautiful landscape painters painting this scene, and then over there you have like all this commotion. So I always laugh at that that's what it's like when you go outside and plein air paint, which is always exciting. You never know what's going to happen. You could be in the most peaceful place, and then someone rides up and starts talking to you, and it's like the unknown that can happen out there.
Do you still have that painting? That first one?
I do.
That's
I
good.
do, actually. Yeah, it's when my mother moved, when we moved my mother after my father had passed, I took away a bunch of artwork from the house because she's like, what are we going to do with all this stuff? She's not going to throw it out. So I'm like, all right, I'll take some of it. And I found that painting, and I have it hanging in my bedroom. And it brings you right back to that. You know, like whenever I'm having a bad painting day, and it's not a terribly good painting, but it's not the worst thing I could have done out there. But anytime I'm really struggling, I'll kind of go over and look at that and be like, okay, like you love doing this for a reason. And that definitely plays a part in why I have this passion for plein air. I mean, I love doing work in the studio, but there really is nothing like going out there. And it could be stressful when you're at an event and it's raining and it's windy, or you're not feeling well, or you don't like anything that's around. I mean,
do you paint differently for events versus when you just go out by yourself? No one's making you go. You just go out and you're going to go paint. Is it different?
That's another thing that's happened over time doing so many plein air events for so many years. When I first started doing a lot of these events, my frame of thought was, okay, you only have like 4 or 5 days to paint, and you have to put 3 paintings in. So why don't I just go out and do as many paintings as I can, and in the end, I'll look at them and then touch up what I want to put in. But then what happens is you wind up driving around with incomplete paintings that you don't know where you're going with.
Right.
So over time, I learned that, and I'm not a terribly fast painter out there at all. Even on like a 2x6 could take me 4 or 5 hours. I've learned that I have to kind of pull back, fight through the painting, and get it 99% complete, just where I have to touch up kind of a few things here or there. And I don't like to go back to plein air painting twice. I like to kind of complete it and just think about it. And if I don't like it, I just go and do another one. But for an event like Olmsted, and there's like a few other ones where they have size limitations or size restrictions, which I never have to worry about. You can only go this big because we only have this much space to hang your work. There's very few that limit me to how small I can paint. And Olmsted is one of those events where it's 8x10 or larger, or the 8x10 square inch. So I was in the event last year as well. I was doing like 4x20, which is a big, long, panoramic. which I thought was a good idea until I got out there, and I'm like, oh, this is way more difficult than I thought it was going to be to make this interesting. Like, what did I do? But those paintings, I have to go back to 3 or 4 times during an event, because I have to make a decision at that point. My smaller paintings, there's definitely a technique to them for me to get them to where I need them to be finished, which is a lot of layering, a lot of scraping, a lot of back and forth with different techniques, where for me to get to that point on a larger painting, it just takes so much more time, or I can paint totally differently in a different style, which I don't really want to do. So it's kind of, I feel very limited on a large size, which I don't know if
that's kind
you
of
ever heard anyone say that.
Yeah.
Right. But then, like Olmsted last year, I painted alongside my friend Cynthia Rosin for quite a few plein air outings up there. And she likes to go large, but she had a smaller format that she had to paint in because of where we can hang. And she felt limited by having to scale down, which is interesting.
Yeah, it is.
People don't think that.
And her approach to painting is very different. You both have very different approaches to painting.
Right. Her technique doesn't really conform to like scaling down, where my technique doesn't lend itself to scale up. And I think with her, it's like, oh, you would think, oh, just use smaller knives, because she does, a lot of palette knife painting, where, that doesn't quite work for her, maybe, where for me, it's like, oh, just use bigger brushes. That's the thought of other artists, but it doesn't work that way, unless I want to paint in a totally different style, which I could, but it's not what interests me. And then also when I have a size limitation like that, is it a limitation? Is that the right word?
Well, it is the constraint.
Constraint.
Yeah.
It also affects the subject matter I choose, and the subject matter I want to paint, and the subject matter I have to paint. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I choose my small work. The compositions are usually not very dynamic. They're very subtle. They're very quiet, and I choose things when I'm out to choose what I'm going to paint by that idea. But where when I have to scale up, it's kind of like, all right, what can I do in this space and still try to keep the same intimacy I want to have in a smaller painting? I have a hard time with that. And sometimes I just kind of got to go for what I know I can get done, because we're under a time constraint. At the end of the week, I do have to have 3 paintings, and they all have to be consistent, and I have to put them up on the wall to be judged. That was probably all really confusing, wasn't it?
No.
Did it make sense?
It does. It really does. It's not that far off. When you're in a competition or an event like this, where there are certain rules that have to be followed, part of that's part of the marketing. That's what they're marketing to collectors. Mm-hmm. They're going for certain standards and things like that. Yeah. You're almost painting for a client in a way.
Right.
Beyond the collector, you're painting for the organization that's the middleman for that. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. But that's just the nature of it. And
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely don't want to go. The last thing I want to do is go into an event and be like, oh, well, I paint small and you have to change the rules for me. No, that's not how this works.
Exactly.
How this works is, I feel honored to be in these shows. I feel honored to be chosen, and I feel honored to be painting with some of the best painters in the country. If these are the rules, I can either say, yeah, I'm in, or no, I'm not in anymore. And I choose to go into these things because I paint 22 by 32s in my studio.
This
might not be what I want to paint, but I'm not going to miss out. I'm invited to this beautiful event with such lovely people, and I get to be with my friends and see what they're painting, which is how I learn too. I mean, these events have been crucial to my development as an artist. You go through schooling all these years, and then you get out, and it's like, all right, well, now what? Well, I could take workshops or whatever. But I mean, there's nothing better than going out and struggling.
You got to get out there.
Yeah. And then sitting down at night and having a beer with your friends and complaining about like something in your painting you can't fix. And then you talk about it. And the whole dialogue really is a wonderful thing to be part of. I mean, I would never be where I am now in my development as a painter without the people, even if I've just met them once and saw their work in person. It's been so important for me.
I think that's wonderful. The other side of this is when you're painting outdoors, you do come in contact oftentimes with the public. And have you ever, now that can be taken negatively. Because I know it can be stressful, but on the flip side, I'm sure there's positive experiences with that. Have you had a positive experience interacting with the public when you've been painting outside?
Oh yeah. I mean, somebody tell you a story about, I was out painting once and someone says, I got engaged right under that tree. Too bad I wasn't painting that tree because I probably would have had a sale.
Funny you should mention that. If you hang on for another hour, I'm going to be...
Yeah, I'll put that tree in. If you like that tree, that's what she said. She said, yes, okay, I'll paint that tree. Wonderful experiences with people. Some crazy experiences too, but
All right, I'll bite. What happened?
Oh, wow. Easton, a couple of years ago in Easton, Maryland, I was out painting and this big storm was coming through, and I was in this huge parking lot on the Chesapeake Bay. I think there's like a hospital there in Cambridge. It was actually in Cambridge, Maryland. And this big storm was coming, and this baby was in this baby carriage on top of this hill with an elderly woman. And the parents of the baby were kind of down the hill fishing. And there's this huge boat launch kind of down the hill. And I'm watching the storm come in. And I was like, wow, this is going to be real cool. I'm going to start another painting, see if I can capture the storm and everything. And it started getting a little scary, like lightning and stuff. And now I'm kind of like, that baby shouldn't be on top of that. None of those people should be out there. They should be kind of coming in away from the storm. And then all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see the baby carriage rolling down the hill.
No.
Way. Yep, by itself. And I'm like, there's no baby in there. And then I see the elderly woman get up and start screaming and going, oh, no. And I saw one little foot kick. The thing is going backwards towards the Chesapeake Bay. And I'm like, and for a second, I was Wonder Woman. I ran. I didn't know I could run that fast in flip-flops. I ran, and I got to this boat launch, like right as this baby carriage flipped up in the air and went about it seemed like 3 circles in the air. It was probably like 2, and landed face down in the boat launch on this concrete boat launch.
Oh,
and
no.
She was kind of half in the water, half not. And I ran over and I was the first one there. I kind of like slowly picked this thing up because I'm thinking like, all right, these shows I watch, neck injury, like what, I'm not a doctor.
Yeah.
I get squeamish on all this stuff. And that ended that painting session because I was shaking like a leaf until, about 9 o'clock that night. But yeah, things like that happen. I've seen. You almost get arrested a couple times for painting when you're not supposed to be painting. That happens. I mean, but the flip side is...
Wait, you can get arrested for painting?
Oh, if you're trespassing or if you're there past 9 o'clock, or I don't trespass, but if you're in a parking lot in a marina and you don't see the sign that says, after, dusk, you can't be here. You don't see that sign and you're just painting away. Yeah, that could happen.
Wow, I didn't know you was living a life of crime here, Christa.
Yeah, it gets a little, yeah. I was just in Florida. I saw in one landscape painting session, I saw a ginormous alligator. I saw a flamingo flying in the air. I saw wild boar. And I met these like wonderful people. Every person that came up, they offered me their binoculars. I'm minding my own business. They offered me their binoculars to see the alligator and this and that. You know, so you meet people like that who want to share nature with you. About another time I was painting up in the Hudson Valley area up in Poughkeepsie, New York, and I'm parked there. It's the summer. It's hot. I'm all set up. I'm the only one there, and I'm like, this is great. Nobody's here. And all of a sudden, this guy pulls up, like I'm about 10 minutes into the painting. This guy pulls up two spots next to me in this big, giant Harley Davidson. He looks like if you were going to cast a big, scary biker, this is the guy you were going to cast in a movie. And he had all the gear on and everything. And he had like the saddlebags on the side of this Harley. And he pulls up and he gets out and he goes to the back, to the saddlebag, gets out this little tiny stool, sets up the little stool, then goes back again, gets his dinner, comes and he sits there and he just ate his dinner, didn't talk to me at all. And about 45 minutes later, he just commented. He was standing pretty far away from me. He said, "That's really beautiful." I said, "Oh, thank you." And he proceeded to tell me in about 10 minutes, an owl is going to come and fly and sit on that branch.
So he said an owl's going to come in 10 minutes and sit on a branch.
In 10 minutes and sit on that branch in that tree in that field. I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. Sure enough, this owl comes, flies down, lands on that branch. And I says, now the other one's going to come in another 10 minutes and sit on that other branch. Sure enough, this owl came down, sat on that branch. And we struck up a conversation and he proceeded to tell me everything about all the mountains out there. And then he told me this other story about he studied art history. He had like a master's degree in art history. And he told me some kind of story about somebody called him over to look at a painting they found in the attic. And it wound up being some like missing masterpiece of some artist in the Hudson Valley, one of the Hudson Valley painters. I mean, it was like an original thing.
Maybe like a coal painting or something like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's things like that where the guy that's going to be cast as the head biker in a bike gang in a movie he knew all this stuff, and it was one of the loveliest conversations I'd had with someone at that time. So yeah, you meet a lot of really cool people. People in the Hudson Valley area, especially, are very proud of their mountains here, and they tend to know the history of them and
they're
the
keen
names
observers.
of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I feel really dumb when I don't, I'm sitting there painting it and I have no idea what the heck the name of the mountain is or the history of it that I'm painting.
Well, you're learning. See, he came and he lent to your education. So that's cool.
Yeah.
What a nice experience that was. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. That was really cool.
Wait,
the best part of it was
wait, there's more, huh?
Okay. I said, after this whole thing, like he said, we introduced us. I said, "Oh, my name is Christa, by the way." And he had some kind of crazy name like Thor. He's like, yeah. He's like, "Hi, I'm Thor," or Bear or something. It was some kind of crazy name like that. And I was like, oh my God, this is like, no one would believe this story if I told them. But it's the fun part. Better than being scared and shaving babies.
Yeah, I'm going to have a challenge coming up with a really good episode title for your episode. Wonder Woman.
Yeah, Wonder Woman. The visual that'll get.
I may run into some trademark issues if I do that. Well,
so funny.
That is so cool.
Do you do plein air painting or no?
I do, but not much. I'm not as much as a lot of the folks that I talk to. Do you like it when you go out? I do.
And you've done it? Have you liked it?
So here's it's sometimes difficult for me to get out because of other obligations and things like that. But when I do, I do enjoy it. There's a measure of stress associated with it sometimes if I do it with someone else, which I have. But I have my first painting hanging right here next to my computer monitor. It's a reminder of me. I like having first, though they're terrible, because it's like a milepost. So that's the first milepost.
Oh yeah, no, it's just like you had asked me, like if I still had my first landscape painting, my plein air painting. It's a first, and it brings you right back to like what you were thinking and your struggles and that kind of stuff.
Well, that's the thing about it is what I've noticed the few times that I have done it, I can remember so much more in connection with that painting than I could if I had just stopped and taken a photo.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not knocking taking the photo. Yeah. But like this painting that's before me right now, it's a seascape. I did it at Sanibel Island. It was the first time I did it. And I was scared to death because
where's Sanibel Island?
It's in Florida. It's on the East Coast. It's way down below St. Petersburg in that area. You go down to Fort Myers and Cape Coral. My youngest son and his wife.
That's why it sounds familiar, because I was just in, what do you call it?
Where?
Jupiter.
Oh, yeah,
Jupiter.
yeah.
Yeah. That was on the map, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on. I'm sorry. Go on.
No, it's I'd never been. It was the first time I'd ever been in that part of Florida. But my wife and I went out. She read a book and I set my stuff up. And I had absolutely no clue what I was doing. I'm fiddling around. Okay, what tubes of paint am I going to use? Setting up the paint box and then trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to paint? And sure enough, I'm doing all of this and people start coming up. Because it's just a people magnet, and I'm scared to death. I don't want to be unfriendly to them. I think we're ambassadors to the hobby and the profession. But anyway, I did it. I started doing it, and I had one guy walk up and he says, "Wow, that's really cool." And then I had another guy. He and his wife, they like the biker. They set up the two directors' chair behind me.
They watched you.
They grabbed their sandwiches and just watched me paint. They were from somewhere up in Canada, and So anyway, it was just kind of a interesting. But I can remember the smells. I could tell you how the beach looks. I remember their faces and what they were driving, what they were eating. It's just bizarre that that many details stick with you when you're painting.
Well, there's just like if you're a portrait painter or a figurative painter or even a still life, when you get to know the subject, whether it's standing in front of a tree for 4 hours or having a model sit for a portrait for a couple of days or whatever, when you get to know the subject matter, look at the subject matter, see it move, and there's an intimacy between it. And I have a really hard time keeping a painting if I don't feel like I had some kind of connection to the tree all the way out in that field, which is what drew me to it. Or,
so what do you do with the painting then if you don't have that connection?
Oh, I scrape it right off. I
no
have
mercy.
This theory. No. I have this theory from doing these plein air paintings, plein air events for so long. Like I had said before, when I first started doing these events, and I would do like a whole bunch of paintings, and then in the end, I would try to pick the best ones. I'd even keep the ones that I really didn't like, and I knew that weren't successful, but I'd still have them in the back of the car, and I'm driving around with them. But the thing is, I learned that even if you have 3 paintings back there where you're like, all right, these are okay. I'll decide if I like them later, or which one's my competition piece. And then you got that one dud in the back, which there's no helping. It's going to take a miracle to fix that painting. Why drive around with a dead body in your car? Wipe it out.
Oh, there's that life of crime coming out again.
Yeah.
So where do you dispose the body, right?
Where do you dispose the body? But I don't want to drive around with dead bodies in my car, so I wipe out anything if I'm gonna like find the most beautiful place to paint, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna paint the Hudson River, and there's a boat out there, and the clouds are beautiful, and I have 2 days in painting at this event, and I got 2 paintings that are okay, but this is gonna be the competition piece. I can feel that this is the painting that's really gonna come through. And you open your trunk and you see that dud of a painting in there, it just brings you down. You go, okay, don't do that. Don't do that again. Don't use those colors. And I find there's just like a negativity to it. And at the end of the week, I would rather have less paintings than a bunch of ones that I know are good to put in the show, and then that one that just brings you down. You know, that's
yeah.
I find that it sets me up for a struggle if I got that dead body in the car. But I've never killed anybody, so
Well, I'm glad we got
that's
that
not
disclaimer.
my thing. Yeah.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Paintings, yes, I've killed plenty of paintings, but that's where it ends.
Oh my goodness. Well, I won't ask you what's in the trunk of your car, but I will ask you what, right now. But what's in your painting toolkit?
Oh, well, I like, as far as paint or my brushes and everything.
Sure, yeah.
It's funny because like whenever I give a talk or something and I get into, I went to this school and that, like, everyone's like, all right, let's go. Let's see the goods. Let me see the palette. I want to see the setup, which I don't, painting on a small scale, painting 2 by 6 paintings, often plein air. I don't think about the fact that other people that have never painted that size or just think that that's crazy, I don't realize that they wonder what the heck kind of easel I'm using to hold that panel. And I love my French easels. I love them. I mean, I've had one since I was 12 years old. I love that thing, but they don't hold a 2-inch by 3-inch panel. Even if you tape it on there on a bigger panel, it's like you got this big thing and this little tiny thing. It's just, so I have a cigar box with a tripod mount on the bottom. And I had it customized for me from some guy on eBay, believe it or not. And I got that about 8 or 9 years ago. I actually have to find his name again because the parts are falling off and I need to get them fixed. Yeah, it's a custom job. It's a custom job, and it's very, he was just like this handy guy, and he made the perfect. I had been looking for a smaller rig for a long time, and he just customized it to me where it's really comfortable to use, because those little panels, you get a little wind behind them and they are off to the races. I mean, they just take off like kites, you think the big ones do, the little ones just take off. So the cigar box lid actually shelters and shields me from any kind of wind or movement. And it kind of just fits into the cigar box lid there. Actually, I just did a time-lapse video on my Instagram, and you can see it there. And then I'm using just a regular, I think it's a Me Photo tripod. And it's pink. I like it because it's pink. And then I kind of made little oil cups to hang off the side, and I made my palette, and it's got a little palette extension on the cigar box. And then I use only bristle brushes no soft brushes, unless I'm using like a little tiny liner brush or something, which I avoid like the plague, because once you start getting into little tiny brushes like that, now you're doing like miniature work. Because I don't consider myself a miniaturist. I just paint small paintings. Those miniaturists and those historically miniature paintings are those beautiful little portraits.
Oh yeah.
From the turn of the century and stuff. I mean, that's like a whole other set of like, that's what I can, that's miniaturist. I just paint small paintings.
Are you using lightweight flats or something like that? Or
I'm using, I'll tell you, the brush that changed the way I painted was rosemary, bristle, there's zero, silver. And the zero you think is really, really small, but it's kind of like if you went to the store and bought like a 1 silver bristle brush.
Right. Yeah.
It's smaller than that. So the silver allows me to have that point, and then I can have a flat edge, and then I can and I'm really rough on them. So then when they fray a little bit, that allows me to grab paint on the little tips, and then I can kind of run that over a shape and make sky holes. And the brush is really important. Without that brush, I couldn't do what I'm doing. There's no brush I've tried that's allowed me to make the mark making I need to make.
At that size.
And it's really not as small as you'd think.
Yeah.
Like people are actually really, really like surprised to see the size brushes I use when I do paint. But I use a knife a lot. I'm doing a lot of scraping, so that I have that one favorite knife. I'm using those rubber tools. They look like a paintbrush, but they have little rubber nubs on the end of them. And I bought these things in like 1996 when I was starting college, just because I was shopping with my then boyfriend, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you need these." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I need those." And I never used them until a couple of years ago, and those are great because I can pull out, and I only work on panel. I don't work on canvas that size. Now, when I get into like a 22 by 32, I work on canvas.
When you say a panel, are you just talking about gesso on a board, or is there like linen glued to a board? What's the surface like?
So I'm working on those, what do you call them? Those gesso boards, or that you can buy in the store, those hardboard gesso boards.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what I do is I can't do anything with my framer. My framer, Ray, is an angel. Not only that, he listens to me. Like, I'll
That's
go in
important.
there and I just go in there and I'll be talking about nonsense, and his ears are probably bleeding by the time I leave. But he makes beautiful frames for me. Not a lot of people will make frames this size because they don't want to lose their fingers. And those chops, the things that just chop them, I think they only go down to like 4 inches or something. So you have to have someone that's willing to do this, saw stuff on a circular saw. I'll buy a big gesso board, 24, 36, or whatever size they come in. And he cuts those down to the sizes I want. And then I take those home and I oil prime them. Even though they're primed already, I oil prime them. I usually like to let them cure for a month or two, because the surface, it definitely is a different feel than a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, is the oil ground, is that like Gamblin's oil ground, or what
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right now I'm using the Gamblin oil primer.
Yeah.
And I thin it down, and I don't put it on with a knife. I put it on with a fan brush, and I do very thin, like I'll do thin coat one way, let that dry. The next day I do a thin coat the other way, almost like I'm making a canvas weave on it.
So you're leaving a little texture on it.
Yeah, a little bit. It's different than painting on those gesso boards are really slick.
Yes,
and I know a lot of
yeah.
people don't like them. A lot of people gesso them anyway, but the oil primer has just a nice feel to it. And then what I do is I tone those to like a terra vert kind of color, kind of green color. Really what I do is whenever it's the color that winds up whatever is on your palette at the end of a session, and you scrape it all up and you kind of mix it up, and it always comes out like a earthy kind of green color or a gray, and then I tone them that color. So then when I go plein air, I do very little drawing. I kind of just sketch out like where the tree is going to be, where the field is going to be, let's say where the water is in the marsh or whatever. And then I go in and I carve out the shapes with lighter colors. So that tone is either my middle ground or my dark ground, depending on what I'm looking at. Plus it's already an earthy color. So you can almost sometimes leave that tone as the base color of your tree or your foreground or whatever. And then my frame, thank God, like I said, thank God for my framer, because he cuts these little tiny panels for me and then makes these beautiful frames. And then I float them in the frame. I'm Velcroing these things.
Oh, wow.
I'm on a black panel. I'm Velcroing them in the frame. So you almost they're floating within usually a pretty traditional or modern traditional frame.
Do the frames have wide? Are they the molding on it? Is it wide or is it more like a float frame?
I love those wide, expensive frames, that moldings where I'll go and I'll pick something off the wall and he'll just look at me and go, shake his head and go put it back. He knows I'm not going to like the price. That happens a lot. But sometimes I take what I can get there, and he has some molding set aside for me. Or if he does a job and there's leftover molding enough to make a frame for me, we use that. But with the small paintings, you see, now this is where I think that it also had an influence, that job working at the Olson and Company, where I worked as a Christmas elf making Christmas ornaments, definitely had an influence on presentation of my artwork. Like, it has to be perfect, like perfectly framed, and the corners of the frames have to be perfect. And because there's so little, you see any kind of flaw in the frame, or any kind of, if I'm floating them, if they're off a tiny bit, you can really see that it's off.
Yeah, you got to have a lot of precision with them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I drop them into these frames. It's like playing a game of Operation.
Yeah.
You know, and I have these big long nails, and I kind of use the nails as my guide to like kind of drop them into these frames really precisely. And that definitely influenced the presentation of my artwork. But yeah, those panels. So I'm working on usually anything under, God, I don't even know what size anymore, because either I go really small or really big. Like, there's kind of no in between. Like, I'm not doing 8x10s, although for Olmsted I had to do some larger. You'll see some larger paintings on there for me, because now that it's the reimagined version of Olmsted, a lot of
it opened things up.
Yeah, we had this big conference call, and I was like, all right, you all know what my question is going to be.
No.
Can I paint whatever size I want? And she was like, yes. I said, thank you. But what I think is so funny is I have that limitation like lifted, but I have a lot of larger paintings that I'm putting in, which...
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, but there's a lot of little guys here but I think that comes with the whole thing we were talking about earlier, where I think I'm having this battle in my studio right now of I'm too comfortable with the smaller paintings, and now I'm working on these larger paintings. I'm kind of avoiding these little ones right now, which I don't quite know why, but they need to get done.
It's that discomfort coming through again. Yes.
The discomfort. But yeah, and then anything else is another thing I keep that everybody laughs about, but it serves a purpose. I have a mascara brush, numerous mascara brushes of course, not with mascara on them, old ones that I use often in my paintings because they're great. They're on a metal. Most of them are on a metal stem, so you can bend that stem, and the tip is metal, so you could kind of scrape, but it has the bristle, so it kind of softens when you scrape. And then also when I'm getting too fussy out there, like, and I'm painting grass and all this stuff, and I'm like, there's too much going on here in a little space, and it's flattening everything out. I'll go, oh yeah, the mascara brush. I'll take that out and kind of soften everything. That's what I use a lot.
Okay, good.
So that's going to be me them.
Yeah, well, that's going to be another weird purchase I make on Amazon. So there you go.
Honey, I need to get mascara.
Oh, wow.
But then at the same time, when I'm paying like $25 a pop for like mascara, I'm like, there's got to be a use to this brush.
Yeah, well, it's become a multitasker. It's not
multitasking.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Yeah.
Krista, you've been a real pleasure to talk with. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your story here on The Artful Painter.
Thank you. Thank you for having me as well. It was lovely to get to meet you, and hope we can meet in person one day.
Yeah, we'll have to do that in a future Olmsted event, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I certainly enjoyed that energetic conversation with Crista Pisano. Be sure to check her website out, CristaPisano.com. You can also see a number of examples of her work that's for sale at the Olmsted Plein Air 2020 Reimagined. They have a virtual catalog. You can see several examples of her work. Just go to olmstedpleinair.com and you'll see a button for the virtual gallery. I'll also include links to her website and Olmsted Plein Air in the show notes and blog post for this episode. I recently received an email that was in the form of a question. It was a question about my handmade sketchbooks that I sell on my website at carlolson.tv, and the tab that you would click is sketchbooks. It takes you to a store that features those handmade sketchbooks that I like to put together. So this is what Mary Ellen asked. She asked, is the paper you use the same as the paper used by Scott Christensen? You describe yours as earthy tan, and I'm trying to gauge if it is essentially the same color that he uses. And then her second question is, also the covers I prefer are sold, so I was wondering if you can make any more in these series. Question number one about the paper that Scott Christensen uses, the answer is yes, I use the same paper he uses. It's Thunderbolt 80-pound craft cover stock. It is an earthy tan color. It's a smoother paper. It is lighter than most paper bag or craft paper that you will buy at Sam Flax binders or Hobby Lobby and Michael's and places like that, or paper supply companies. The paper is a little bit lighter than that, and I prefer that. The other is just too dark or too rough. This is much smoother, so you can use pen and ink. It's good for pencil. You can use gouache on it very easily, which is what Scott Christensen uses a good bit on that type of paper. You can also use oil paint on it. If you expect the paper to last, though, you need to cover it with, say, a clear gesso or GAC 100 from Golden or something like that, so that the paper is not affected by the oil paints. Otherwise, it'll rot over time and not last. However, if you don't care about that, you're just using it for studies and that sort of thing, and you're not concerned about its longevity, you don't even have to do that. Also works well with acrylics, markers. Just bear in mind that because it is a tan color, which is already a middle tone, it will affect the colors of markers. Like if you're using some of the Winsor & Newton's alcohol markers, for example, or something like that, the colors will be different. I tend to use grayscale markers myself, so I don't have a problem with color shift like that. So just remember, the whole point of this sketchbook is that middle tone color there.
The second question she asked is about ordering those that have been marked as sold. See, every time someone buys one of my custom-made handbooks, and they're each one of a kind, it's marked sold. The answer to her question is a qualified yes. Most I can make again. It won't be exactly the same, but it'll be close. So if the Italian papers that I use for the cover is still available and I can get it, then I can make it. But even if I do make it, it won't be 100% exact because there will be some variation there. But for the most part, it's the same thing. So if you're interested in any of those sketchbooks, all you have to do is go to carlolson.tv and click on the sketchbooks tab there. The other thing is the store that I have is set up for U.S. customers. And it's not because I'm prejudiced toward anyone else throughout this beautiful world that we live in. It's just the way that the store works. I can do a workaround. One thing to take into consideration, for example, if you live in Canada, the postage is going to be considerably higher than what is here in the United States. It's very unfortunate. I wish that weren't the case. So, but if you're interested in purchasing one or more of my sketchbooks, you don't see it available, it's marked sold, that's okay. Just drop me a line, tell me which one you like, and also tell me your address, and I'll give you an estimate. So if you live in Canada, you live overseas in Europe or something like that, I will give you an estimate for what it will cost to ship. And if you decide to commit to it, then what I will do is I'll set you up a special private page where you can buy the product and enter your credit card and make the purchase, complete the purchase. And then you'll get emails from the e-commerce system that I use to let you know that the order has gone through. I appreciate everyone for supporting me. I never expected these sketchbooks to take off like this. It's really been a lot of fun to make them. It's a lot of fun to use them. And it's just an unexpected surprise. So I really appreciate it. It helps support and offset the cost of producing the Artful Painter podcast. I'm experimenting with other papers, particularly handmade watercolor paper, and I hope to be able to share those with you soon. I may make them available as one-of-a-kind sketchbooks for sale on my website as well. Now, let's go on to a little bit of feedback here. This is from Serena. They say, thanks for sharing your knowledge. I always look forward to listening to your podcast, either while I'm walking or driving or painting or even doing my breakfast dishes, as was the case today. I agree with you when you said that you are never too old to learn something new. Never stop. Cheers from Western Australia. Oh, my goodness. I'm always amazed at the reach of this podcast. People from all over the world are listening, and I deeply appreciate it. Thank you, Serena, for taking the time to comment on that. Speaking of the podcast, I did get a question the other day about someone was having difficulty finding it. So there's any number of ways to find the podcast. The first way to do it is simply go into Google and type in Artful Painter Podcast. You will find my website that way. Or you can go to carlolson.tv, and there you will find the podcast too. Let me look it up real quick. I'll just share the path to it so you don't even have to guess or look up the show notes. So you go to carlolson.tv. You'll see a tab that says podcast. And when you click on that, it'll take you straight to the Artful Painter podcast. And there you'll see all the episodes. And keep in mind that when you click on one of those episodes, you will see a little audio player. So if you don't have any way of listening to the podcast on your mobile device, you don't have a podcast app or something like that, you can go to my website and it will play. There's a little player there that you can click the play button and listen to it. It also has a feature where you can download it. There are several links to other podcast distribution services. You can listen on Apple Podcast if you have an iPhone or an iPad. You can listen on Google Podcasts. However, I will say you will not find it on Google Play because there's no way to submit a podcast to it anymore.
I have one old podcast that's still there, but I think they're transitioning away from it. So if you use Google Play to listen to podcasts, those days are numbered with Google. They're moving over to Google Podcasts. You can also listen on Spotify, on Radio Public. You can listen on Stitcher, and you can listen on YouTube, which a lot of people do. They go to YouTube. It's audio only. There's no video there, but they go there and listen to it. And it's convenient. It's easy to do. So, so there's any number of ways to find it. But really, the easiest way to do it is it's not rocket science. Just go to a web browser and type in Artful Painter Podcast and in Google or whatever search engine you like to use, and you'll find it. There'll be several references to the podcast there. So I wish it was easier. But to come to think of it, I really don't know how to make it any easier than that. So I do appreciate the interest in listening to the show. And another good way to do it is if you have a friend you want to recommend the show to, that's always helpful. You can help them see how to find it, and they can choose whichever way is easiest for them to listen. Speaking of YouTube, I do have a YouTube channel. It is called Carl Olson TV. And I've released a few videos on there. The podcast is on there as an audio only videos. So that's one thing that's out there. But it's kind of a trickle right now. I do release a few videos from time to time. They're just little random rambles that I have. My latest one was I did this practice live stream called Artful Painter Live Artist Technology Challenges. I was talking about the challenge of that artists have with websites and also with selling courses about their teaching courses. So I talk about that a little bit. I did another video, which was quite long. It's talking about art criticism and critiques, and it would be interesting to get your take on that. Of course, it's a very long. It could have been a podcast episode in and of itself, but I talk about that as I assemble an order of my sketchbooks, so you get a behind-the-scenes look as to what I do. And then, there's a few others out there, such as oiling out a painting and also some of the troubles I've had with eBay and Amazon packaging, if you're interested in that sort of thing. All right, enough about that. Just remember, you can go to YouTube, do a search. Search is your friend, right? Carl Olson TV, and you'll find it. Okay. Finally, I want to thank my associate producers. You might ask, who are my associate producers? I'm going to tell you in just a second. But what are they? Well, they're people who give financial support to the Artful Painter. They support this show with their generous donations. And that can be done at carlolson.tv and click on the Donate tab. And it can be $1, it can be $100, whatever you want. Anything is appreciated. It helps offset the production cost of this show. I have two new associate producers that I want to acknowledge. Brent Kimber from Utah and Deborah Mueller from New Hampshire. Thank you so much for your generous support of this show. So that means my current list of associate producers, let me read them. I want to acknowledge everyone. Deborah Mueller, Brent Kimber, Alan Bloom, Jeffrey Eichhoff, Jim McVicker, Frank Wash, and Colleen White. So thank you all for your support of this show. It really makes a difference, and I'm very appreciative of that. And you can make, some of these have actually made multiple donations, so they'll donate what they can this month, and maybe a month or two down the road, they'll donate something else. I don't tell anyone what to do. I mean, it's a gift that supports this show, and I appreciate it. So whatever you do is fine. So thank you for that. I truly love hearing from everyone. So if you want to ask me a question, send me a note, give me feedback. I appreciate all of those things. All you have to do is go to my website at carlolson.tv and click the Contact tab. There you go. Well, thank you for listening to this edition of The Artful Painter. Let me tell you something before I say absolutely goodbye, right? So I'm thinking about, I've got 2 more episodes recorded. So Amanda Lovett is coming up. That will come out next week. And then the week after that,
will be my first video podcast. I'm experimenting with that. So Brian Mark Taylor, the inventor of the Strata easel and also the co-founder of Sentient Academy, as well as co-founder Keith Huang, also the co-founder of Sentient Academy, join me in video. So I look forward to sharing that with you. So anyway, thank you for listening to this edition of The Artful Painter. I'll see you in the next episode.
Picture on the TV.